Well, welcome divas and dudes to our nutrition class. I want to finish up our talk around phytoestrogens and really looking at all of the issues around what happens to our body when we lose hormones. And just remember that men and women, women are not the only ones that go through a menopause. Men do as well. It's just slightly different. But just know that our bone health, women and men, really have a big role with our hormones. And we're going to talk about vitamin D, not really being a vitamin at all. It's really a hormone. I talked about that last week a little bit. And so what I wanted to do today is just kind of do a summary of where we're going with phytoestrogens. And I always want to give you some action points. So, what are we going to do with this information, especially knowing that the whole world of nutrition and phytochemicals that come from foods and medicine and nutraceuticals is really a growing science. I've studied this for most of my career, and I still am realizing that there's lots of not only new information, but ways to better understand and maybe even reinterpret the data and the information that's out there. And so, getting new information doesn't necessarily mean we've discovered something new. It just means that now we've sort of been able to step back and wrap our arms around large parts of data, large studies, and group them together to get more of an idea of really where we're going. So today I want to kind of give us the summary, but I also want to, use the knowledge that we've started with in looking at data and understanding and how to be a good scientist. So how I wanted to kind of start this journey is how we typically would as folks interested in a topic. We're going to go to Google and look it up. And now with a new set of tools, I want us to understand how to navigate a little more judiciously around the information that the internet will provide us. So I hope that's going to be what we can accomplish. So really, bone health, the search for answers that help us take action, is always going to be the theme of what we do. And, from the beginning, nutrition has always really mattered in the foods that we do at Powerhouse Bakery. And so learning about science and how to apply the beautiful colors of fruits and vegetables and stuff from the earth is always where I want us to go back to. So whether you're doing some cooking in your own kitchen or you're eating out at a restaurant or maybe even coming to visit us, I always want you to have the theme of what's in it for my health. What's in it for me? If I'm going to eat this food, is every bite going to give me a powerhouse of opportunity of health, like support? I think that's a good word for it. So here we are. We have a question. We want to understand where are we in the search for answers around osteoporosis. We know that we are in increased risk of our bones being weak because of our history of cancer. So how do we look at this information when we look at studies on the internet? So notice here, the first thing we have is this little ad. When we type in osteoporosis and health, the first thing that comes up is a paid ad. So when we go into the American Bone Health and Osteoporosis and Bone Density, notice a little blog up here says, make a difference in the lives of those before and after an osteoporosis diagnosis. Newly diagnosed, where to get help and support and resources. When you click on this, it takes you to a donation site. So I was a little disappointed that right away it's asking for money and it's asking you to be a part of a support system. It doesn't give us answers. So I thought, well, that's not good. You go down a little bit farther and you see Bone Health and National Women's Health Network. Find the facts and resources you need to know with the National Women's Health Network. Women have long sought ways to safely end their risk of fertility diseases. So you have to really be careful because you could follow this bunny trail and never get to some data that is actually what we were trying to look for. So I followed one that was a little farther down, and it was called Science Direct. And now I'm finding some textbook information, hormones and disorders of mineral metabolism, and then there's vitamin D. So I thought it was really interesting that right away we're being asked to be a part of a funding program. Second, we have to know how to search a little deeper. So Science Direct, you wouldn't really find when you're hunting for answers around osteoporosis. So we have to be so careful that we're not trending into an area where they're asking us to buy supplements or to pay for some kind of service that really is not going to give us the knowledge that we need. Instead, it's trying to pull us in and have us be a part of an organization when we're not even sure where we are yet. Now, what I like about this little slide is it talks about nutrition and photosynthesis. So vitamin D can be obtained from dietary sources or of animal origin. About 50% of the dietary vitamin D is absorbed by the enterocytes and transported into the blood. So remember, I mentioned last week that vitamin D is a very unique vitamin. Remember, I mentioned that for starters, it's quite rare to find in foods. We're going to look into that a little bit more, but it's not easy. There's not a lot of it. What vitamin can you think of that has a lot of sources in different foods? Like vitamin C. Yeah, vitamin C is everywhere, right? I just bought groceries for Powerhouse this morning, and I love the fact that right in the very produce section, there's ads. I pull up a bag of potatoes, and right on the top of the potatoes is a great source of vitamin C. I talked last week about the mushrooms. Ad right on the front of a pack of mushrooms, source of vitamin D. Potatoes, source of sources of vitamin C, and of course fiber. So we see some great sources. Now we have to look a little deeper to know, what did nature equip those potatoes with versus what did maybe man encourage or even supplement? What beverage do we buy that has a vitamin D added? All dairy products, yeah. And now even some orange juice has vitamin D added. So I thought it was very interesting that we as a nation have decided that that vitamin is so important that we're going to put it into foods. Now you'll see that there's really some confusion around whether or not vitamin D taken supplementally does actually help. I alluded to that last week, so we're going to look at that a little bit deeper. And so, why are we as a country going to move forward on something even if we're not 100% sure that it's going to help? I think that's a valid question, and so we as consumers want to be really informed and make our own decisions. Is that something I want to take? And remember, we always think of what? Risk and benefit. When we're looking at any kind of nutraceutical or supplementation, we want to know, well, what's the potential risk if I try this? Is it okay to have insurance? And what is going to be my cost? Remember, we talked about the 4 harms. The harm could be that it could be just expensive. It could not work and be discouraging. It could actually hurt our organs. Sometimes we have organ issues or subclinical issues going on in our bodies we don't even know about. Mary Tom mentioned that she was taking one product called St. John's wort, and it caused her blood pressure to go up. She didn't know. And so sometimes those are worrisome because we don't know. And using a supplement and even taking products, if we used a lot of products that were supplemented with vitamin D, that might start to be a problem. Unlike vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin, so it goes out of our body pretty quickly. What do you think vitamin D does? Does it get stored somewhere? It does. It gets stored in the liver. Yeah. So again, vitamin D is not your typical hormone. It's not your typical vitamin. It's actually a hormone. So what it's telling us here is that 50% of the dietary vitamin D is absorbed by the skin. And then it goes into the chylomicrons, which is a large molecule that goes to the liver to get activated. And after it goes to the liver, where's the next stage it goes to? You remember from last week? It goes to the kidney, right? So it has, and then it has to go to one more spot before it really gets fully activated. So the reality is there's a lot of steps in vitamin D efficacy. So when we understand that 50% of the dietary vitamin D, so what we take in, really is going to be absorbed into the circulation and has to go to the liver. Now the other half is going to be activated by the sun in our skin. So there's a lot of factors around this whole process. And then as we go down a little bit farther, it says the best food sources are fatty fish or its liver oils, but it's also found in small amounts in butter and cream and egg yolk. Both human and cow's milk are poor sources of vitamin D, providing a very small amount, so 15 to 40 IUs per liter, which doesn't have to mean anything to you. But I think that it's really cool when we understand that the human milk, which is really the perfect food for babies, has a very tiny amount of vitamin D. And now we're learning that it's stored in the liver, so there's a risk there. Our skin needs to produce at least half of it, maybe even more. And it's pretty easy to find in foods. What's the typical breakfast for Americans? What protein? Yes, eggs. Mm-hmm. Hopefully not bacon. I'm kidding. But yeah, eggs. So do we think that there is reason to believe that we might have a vitamin D deficiency in our country? You think so? What makes you think it? We're not eating right. Well, and that could be, but we know we are eating probably a fair amount of eggs. We might not be eating a lot of fatty fish, but let's agree that people certainly do eat it, maybe even more often than kale and spinach. They probably eat salmon or fish of some sort. And only half of it comes from our diet, so we don't have a 100% requirement. Whereas vitamin C, how much vitamin C do we have to take into our body to be used? 100%. We can't get vitamin C from the sun, right? Our bodies don't make vitamin C. So I think it's really interesting that for some reason we have decided that vitamin D is so important that we have to put it in foods, supplement, even though it does naturally occur in some animal products as well. Before I go to this one, let's make sure I didn't miss anything. So down here, vitamin D intake is a poor predictor of the serum concentration. So right down here, I think this is where I want to spend a minute or two, because our intake doesn't have any reflection on our status. So I want our science brain to take this to the next level and go, so if I take a supplement, is that going to have a bearing on my serum active vitamin D? And your eyebrows should raise. Probably not, right? There's not, and that's where I'm going with this research that we're going to look at today, is there is not a good confidence level that when we take a supplement or we eat foods that we can count on our serum active vitamin D being changed. Just like when we looked at soy, though, remember with the supplementation research, we saw some confusing data, because sometimes when people took isoflavones, it caused cancer cells to increase their growth, and that raised eyebrows. They said, okay, soy must be bad for people, especially if they have cancers. So let's tell everybody not to take soy. And then we turn the other direction and we see a body of data that says, oh my goodness, no, flaxseed plus tamoxifen improve the outcomes of fighting cancer. I mean, right? They're so contradictory. And so, ultimately what I want you to have as a takeaway is that we are in the infancy stage of really understanding how to help people know how to improve on their bodies. What is maybe the best resource that we kind of uncovered in the last few weeks that might give us a lot of hope? Our gut biome. So when we start realizing, gosh, what we eat doesn't have a direct correlation with our levels of these important nutrients like vitamin D, Taking something like soy may or may not have good and bad benefits. Osteoporosis seems to have more going on than just dietary calcium or how much exercise we have. So we're starting to think, wow, there's a whole category of untapped information that we want to learn about. So just yesterday in my office, I was working with a cancer survivor, and she was trying to decide if she wanted to take medicine that would be a estrogen blocker. And we thought, well, let's search the internet and see if we can find a place to have her gut biome studied. Because remember in that very first video, the researchers said, wow, there is such a diverse combination of bacteria in people that it could really have a powerful impact on their health just by the bugs they're carrying around. So wouldn't it be cool if we knew that my particular bugs were going to help soy turn into diazen that would help to fight cancer growing cells? Or wouldn't it be cool if I knew that I had the gut biome that would not help, so I better not take lots of soy products, you know? So it's kind of like this black box in there that we just don't know much about. And so that is something that I hope we can all study more and continue to search and learn and study with a real critical eye. Because we are seeing here that there's so much unknown. And down at the bottom here, it says, you know, that it is very difficult to obtain adequate vitamin D from natural diet. Says who, right? What's adequate? Can't measure it very well. However, in North America, 98% of fluid and dried milk, as well as some margarine, butter, and certain cereals are fortified with vitamin D2 or D3, but the real vitamin D content is frequently quite different from the labeling standard. So more equivocation. And so somebody has decided to supplement, even though we're not really sure of the benefits. And so, you know, highlighting, we know that it naturally occurs in fats. And when we start growing fungus in a certain light, it helps to create that inactive form of vitamin D. And so remember, the inactive form is what we take in, and then it's got to go to the liver and get some changes done, and then it's the kidney and the skin. So all of those, in addition to the parathyroid hormone, will help take this inactive form to the active form. So that's why I like to say it's the non-vitamin vitamin. It really is comes in different forms, and our body has to change it into its active form. So we touched on this study last week, so I wanted to take it a little bit farther because I want this to be an area where we all get to read a little bit more and learn a little bit more. This was reviewed and actually the published study just in October of 2021. So that's really, you know, hot off the press. But the biome has been studied for a long time. So just know that there's a ton of really exciting stuff happening. And here we are in San Antonio, the middle of medical center. We've got UT Health Science Center. I promise you, there are lots of expert researchers and physicians that are looking into this. I don't know if all of you were here last time when I mentioned that I have a good friend that's an RN in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit at one of the hospitals here. And she said that the moms that have a C-section can be given the option to have a vaginal swab given to their infant in order to benefit from her biome. That when babies are delivered C-section, they miss all the important connection to the mom's biome as the baby's being born because they're, you know, cut out of the tummy. So both of my sons were born C-section, and I didn't know to ask, hey, could I please get that swab for my boys? You know, and who knows what repercussions that has. The good news is that we have lots of chances throughout our lifespan to impact what we have, right? So genetics and whether or not we get that swab, even if we have not the best gut biome because we've had to take antibiotics for a lot of our life. There's kids, myself included, that if you have acne, oh, just give them tetracycline forever, you know. And so for years, so that I wouldn't have a pimple, I took tetracycline. And we weren't even warned. gosh, that might be killing off all these really critical, unique types of bacteria that you have in your biome. So the good news is that we always have an opportunity to improve on our situation. And that's where we always want to go back and think about our best foods list. Because we know that we can always do a little better. So I've been studying nutrition since I was 13. I've been passionate about learning fitness and nutrition, and I'm still adding things and tweaking things. So don't think for a minute that I have all the answers, but I love to learn, and that's what I want you to always think about, is how do we investigate? How do we look at the expert source? What makes them an expert, and do I want to trust them? And getting a wide variety of expertise always really helps in deciding if your information is something that you're going to act on. And so this little article, again, is, I think, a really great one. Look at all the experts that are involved in the research. It's not one person's opinion. It's a fairly large study group. The abstracts are really a nice way to kind of understand the gist of the study. Of course, an abstract is going to have a little skew. We can't help it as humans. As unbiased as reporters want to be, whether they're on Fox News or NBC, even if they want to be unbiased, they can't help it. So reading the abstract is excellent, but we also want to get a couple of other sources, or even learn how to read the whole study and see if you can follow the study design, the population size. And remember, we had a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, makes it a really valid one. When I was a research coordinator, I ran research studies for a long time, and we had to make sure that we could do data collection so precisely that our colleague in another town or another city or even another country could do the same thing and come up with the same results. That means it's a valid study. So double blind, remember, means that I don't know who's in what group. I don't know what group is taking the placebo and which one's taking the active medicine. If you can do a double-blind crossover, that means this group got pill A, and now somewhere in the study, this group is going to get pill B. So we get really clean data because it's just as undefined as possible, meaning we didn't select who we wanted to be in group A. If they have big biceps and we're looking for muscle growth, we want to make sure we have these guys that already have strong ability to grow muscles to put them in that one group. We wouldn't want to do that. We want it to be just by chance, who falls into what group. So the human microbiota functions at the interface between diet, medication use, lifestyle, host immune development, and health. It is therefore closely aligned with many of the recognized modifiable factors that influence bone mass accrual in the young and bone maintenance in the skeletal decline of older people. So that means we have control over that. And to me, that's such an exciting thing, that we have a control, we have an ability to improve on our gut biome. How would we do that? How can we improve on our gut biome? Of course, we already heard that taking antibiotics isn't good. But what about eating certain foods? Well, what foods could we eat that would help our gut biome be happy? Yeah. We could eat some prebiotics. So what do I mean by prebiotics? Those are the oligosaccharides. That's a fancy term for sugars that are bundled into groups called complex carbohydrates. So if we eat a good amount of complex carbohydrates, they're going to go into our gut partially digested and be able to feed our bacteria. Now, notice that I have not put take a probiotic pill. Only in rare cases, in my opinion, would we want to take a probiotic pill under a doctor's care so that you are sure that you're going to monitor its success. taking it just in case as insurance could do more harm than good. Anybody remember why that is? Really what I mentioned is that it's kind of like building your militia. If you have an army and each group in the army has their job, and you bring in this group from Russia and they just plop right in and they just mess with the works because they have a whole different plan. Now you've got a very disrupted army. So same idea when you bring in bugs that are just happenstance. Now it could be different if we go somewhere and get the whole DNA sequencing of our gut biome. We know we've got this guy, this guy, this guy. Oh, we don't have this one? Okay, now we can add this in specifically. Remember we learned about that with fecal transplant? And this idea that if we know what we have, and now we can decide to put in what we're missing, well now we've got, the Holy Grail, right? But we're not there yet. So even the lady that I was working with yesterday, and we were trying to find a place where we could learn about her biome. There's probably some out there. I'm going to have to do a little more checking because at first glance, all it was home testing and here, buy this supplement. Again, which I'm always very leery. I don't want us to spend our money without really knowing what is it that we're hoping to gain, and do we have the right tools, and we're confident that that's going to help us get there. So we can improve our biome by minimizing how much bad stuff we put in. So antibiotics are kind of bad. Of course, we've got to take them sometimes, right? What will be some other bad things that we would want to not do? Things like other chemicals. That's kind of a big term, isn't it? A big garbage can of terms. What do you mean chemicals? Well, if we see processed foods that have lots of things we can't produce or pronounce, maybe that should go back on the shelf. That's got a lot of stuff in there. We've learned that different dyes, different like smoke flavorings. If you've ever followed the Whole30 diet, one of the big techniques around the Whole30 diet is to say, let's get all the chemicals out of our diet to help our body function better. So I like that diet because it's kind of cool. Then they go off the deep end and say, take out beans because there's lectins in it. It's like, what? No. There's no good evidence that lectins are a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Some people are going to have a sensitivity to a lot of activity going on in their gut. And the body has to acclimate to having a lot of these prebiotics in your gut. So if you eat a meal that has a lot of beans, and you start feeling gaseous and you have to, go outside the room and, feel bloated. That doesn't mean that beans are bad for you. What do I always... Yes! So portion matters. Especially if your tummy is not used to eating prebiotics. So when we look at this amazing system, it's really not a black box. We know a lot about what's going on in our tummy. And we know that we were built to eat lots of plants. Our bodies are very well equipped to eat plants. What was the number that I gave you as a challenge to try to eat every day? Yeah, 25 to 30 plants a day. And everybody kind of looked at me saying, you crazy. But I've got several ladies that are counting and they're like, dang, it's easier than I thought. And of course, I got to make sure you can count herbs and spices. So now, instead of just putting salt on your broccoli, how about we put some fennel seeds and some coriander and a little sea salt as well, and maybe some fresh garlic, and then some mighty seeds on top. Now, not only did we add protein and fiber and nutrients, we've added flavor, and we've got another bunch of plants we get to add to our count. So see, it's really not hard at all. So we know that portion matters. We know that we are built to eat plants. We know that prebiotics are things that come from plants that truly help our biome function better. When we think of a meat, if you had a big meat dinner for Christmas. Sometimes I think people have prime rib at Christmas. And you eat a large amount of this meat that you don't normally eat. And all of a sudden your transit time of your gut goes way slow. You feel like there's a piece of a brick in your tummy because it's not moving fast. It's very common because meat takes a lot longer for your tummy to have to digest. And so we don't see the transit time as fast. So sometimes it causes constipation. Sometimes you just feel full for a long time or just kind of feel toxic, not used to eating certain foods. Same thing with beans. So whether it's beans or meat, you eat too much of something that your body is not used to, it has a hard time processing it. So yes, I can't tell you how many of my clients, if I can convince them to cut down on the number of pills they're putting in their gullet,
I've done that and it feels better.
Yay! It's making you feel better.
It feels better.
It's
like I had to be taking something like, like milk of magnesia or something every so often. Whether now it's like,
Oh, I'm so excited to hear you say that. Because truly, I used to sell supplements. So please know that when I worked at Lifetime Fitness, I was the #1 in the company for selling all their goodies. Because I thought, wow, this is fantastic. More must be better. If a little is good, more is better, and a lot is great. And as I rethink and restudy, and that's why I want you to know that, through my professional career, I'm learning every day. And, I can pivot maybe tomorrow and change my mind and say, nope, we've decided vitamin D we got to take. I'm just not there yet. So I want us to be really careful, but I don't want us to dig our heels in so deeply that we can't jump around and see what's behind us or in front of us or on the side. And, once I came to that realization when I was working as a nutrition coach over there, I've decided that I don't feel right selling these. I decided it doesn't make me feel good, so I can't in good conscience, encourage my clients to eat them. So I want to make sure that if you want to learn more about this study, and I've just given you the abstract, down at the bottom here it says, we also underscore the potential pitfalls in this research field that should be avoided and provide methodological recommendations to facilitate the gap from promising concept to a potential cause. And what that's saying is that study design is really important. So we've got so much more that we need to learn about the biome, about, here it's saying that the preclinical research demonstrated that this biome does have an impact on bone metabolism. So we know there's something there. So we don't want to just jump on the bandwagon and act too quickly, but there's a lot of great hope in this category. Bone research, the Bone Research Academy of the Royal Osteoporosis Society is the one that's kind of spearheading this. And so there's a lot of really good brains trying to figure this out. And so I think following it is going to be good for us. What do we do until we come up with a concise conclusion? We know we can't go wrong by portion matters, eat more from the earth. The Mediterranean diet plan is a really good, tried and true style of eating. It doesn't say take out a food group. It doesn't say you have to all become vegans, otherwise you'll, perish. Of course not. But if all Americans were to follow this kind of plan, I bet we would see a lot of health improvements. Even if we didn't take a vitamin D supplement or a multivitamin 1 a day, but we ate a little differently, I think it would really show in how our bones age, as well as how our cardiovascular system ages, not to mention our predisposition and frank occurrence of cancers. Because there's so much we don't know yet that in fact we're starting to discover in the biome. And what is it about the Mediterranean diet plan that I think is so fantastic? And it's kind of out here somewhere. Run, exercise. So now the nice thing is, if we can stay away from the whole idea of I have to go to the gym to exercise. What does that force us to do? Go outside, and now we've got some sunshine, which now is going to also help our vitamin D. So it's a win-win. And so I spent 30 years teaching group fitness in a gym. So here I'm saying, yeah, that's good, but it's so much better to get out. So much better to get outside and be able to do now multiple things. There's another study that looked at how Americans are so hyper clean that we are harming the biome that lives on our skin. And so I think that's quite funny that, we probably don't need to shower every day. It's not a bad thing to live with dogs and cats. Hopefully you don't have allergies. But, there's some people that are so fearful of germs that, if your puppy licks you on the cheek, you have to run and wash your face.
That would be me.
Yeah.
Probably has more allergies than I do. Then for me, I have to take him to get an allergy shot. I have to put eye drops in his nostrils for allergies. Yes.
Isn't that so discouraging? Well, and so I think that the message is that, wow, we are steeped in a culture that says pills fix. Mm-hmm. And that we have to sanitize everywhere we go. Now, granted, we have an epidemic of, a whole new generation, so I'm not suggesting we don't stay clean. But the idea that the bacteria, both on our skin and in our gut, are absolutely critical. Yes. And so I think it's reassuring. It's okay to get a little dirty. So now I want to transition just a little bit, because I promised you last week that I would give a little more time to protein, especially when it's looking at bone strength. There's a bit of, I don't know about it. There's a debate, I think is the right word, that a high protein diet can actually change the pH in your body and cause bone resorption or bone loss. Have anybody ever heard of the pH diet? Looking at pH is something that is now common when you're looking at water and different foods, because if your pH becomes acidic, this could cause decrease in bone density. And so again, we want high pH, so a 7. I think the waters that are being sold are, higher. pH is kind of it's a big magnitude, orders of magnitude change from a 1 to I think it goes up to 12. And so I don't want to get too technical in the numbers, but let's just say that the food choices and even the selection of water, the intent is to not let our body get too acidic, because that's toxic. And now, what organ do you think manages the pH balance of our body? The kidneys. The kidney is really involved in that. So the electrolytes, so phosphorus and of course calcium, not to mention sodium, potassium, all of those positive charges, so phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. Does anybody take any of these electrolytes as a supplement?
I do. I take magnesium.
Yeah. And so if we're trying to take these minerals, it's to neutralize the negatives. So these are negatives. Acidity, when you go this direction, you're going more acidity. And you're adding these in to bring up the pH. So, that's just a little background in the idea that the belief is if you eat too high of a protein diet, it will cause your pH to go too acidic, and that could hurt your bones. There's a lot of confusion around this. So in this little article, again, this is coming from the International Osteoporosis Foundation. This is written in layman's terms, but over here is this little sidebar, which, you probably would just pass it up, right? But now you're very smart researchers, so you would look at this and go, I wonder what that looks like a smart icon, So of course I followed it, and I'll show you in a second. But this one is just really meant for the layman. And so if we read this, we're going to just assume that the IOF organization is trustworthy. We don't have to do any checking. It's not giving us any actual research. It's just giving us a proclamation. Like that earlier slide I showed you where it's, let me go back real quick. Oops, right here. This one, it's just a proclamation. It's just telling us information about vitamin D and where it's absorbed. It's kind of just a science book. And then same thing with this one. It's giving us information. So I'm making this distinction because now as researchers in your own right, I want you to go, why do they say that? How do I know what they're saying is true and what's it based on? So here it's saying protein is a building block for strong bones and muscles. It provides the body with a source of essential amino acids necessary for health. It's important for young people to eat enough protein-rich foods so their bones develop and grow optimally. In seniors, protein plays a role in preserving bone and muscle. Lack of protein robs the muscle of strength, which heightens the risk of falls and contributes to poor recovery in patients who've had fracture. Does that make us scared? Like, oh gosh, I better go eat my protein. For sure, right? When we don't even know, well, am I having enough? Do you know every research out there, when it looks at intake of Americans, never have we found any people group that doesn't eat enough protein. Even the low income. Even obese people, they eat enough protein based on our, numbers. Yet we still have problems, right? We're still having people that have osteopenia, which, is present. I mean, of course, with the bones, we also see some muscle mass breakdown in people in the elderly. So which foods contain protein? Lean red meat, poultry, fish, as well as eggs and dairy food are excellent sources of animal protein. Vegetable sources of protein include The current recommendation for daily allowance for healthy adults is 0.8 gram per kilogram of body weight. Now, would you guys be able to calculate that? No. Who thinks of 0.8 and kilogram? Nobody, right? So let's first think about what that looks like. So I know, especially in the generation of the folks in this room, we don't even really think of kilograms, right? The younger generation has learned kgs, and so they kind of get an idea. But there is 2.2 kilograms per pound. You got it. So in a 50 kg person, it's gonna be about 100 pounds. I'm just, of course, 0.2, so I'm getting rid of the points. But now we're getting into some context. And 0.8 is pretty close to 1. So we could say about 50 grams of protein is about what a 100-pound person would need. So that kind of, but here's the other smoking gun of kilogram body weight. So is that current body weight? Well, what if I'm 50 pounds overweight and I'm carrying around a lot of extra fat? Do I need to feed that extra fat some muscle or some protein? So there's lots of confusion. Then we're looking at your ideal body weight. So for every 5 feet, you should weigh 100 pounds, plus an inch gives you another 5 pounds. Okay, so now we can do the math. Are you in that range? So again, this is looking at what the insurance companies long ago said, you're lower risk of us having to pay for you if you aren't overweight. So if you are 5 foot tall, you better not weigh more than 100 pounds, otherwise you're going to be too expensive for us. And that's how the body mass index came about. Body mass index. Right? And I bet you know plenty of people that are obese on that scale and are super healthy. Right? Look, I mean, you can work out, you can do all kinds of things. Why would a chart tell us that you're not healthy? But if we're using that as a guide, even when we're determining how many calories and how many grams of protein you need, it really gets complicated. So when I worked at Lifetime Fitness and I was a sports dietitian and I had athletes come in and they said, well, how much protein should I eat? I always get that question. It's like, well, it depends. It depends. So I only bring all that up because it's giving us a little bit of a scare tactic. I mean, who wants to be robbed of muscle and contributing to poor recovery? You know, those are all like gloom and doom. And then it says you have to have this much, and we don't really know how to calculate that. Even if we got this far, what does 50 grams look like? And I did that with you for, in our classes. If we know that 4 ounces of chicken is going to give us, each ounce is 7 grams, so 7 times 4 is 28 grams of protein. Now I know I did that calculation real quick, but look how easy it is to get the protein that you need. And that's just with chicken. I mean, you could have your little cup of beans, you could have your oatmeal in the morning, you might have an egg, and you're way over the protein needs. Yet we're still having these problems as a nation. So there's a disconnect there that I think needs to be mentioned. So when we look at really understanding the science, we want to understand, well, what else could be going on? So I clicked on one of that little graduation cap, and it took me a little bit more into some detail. So debunking the acid load claim. Many people have read claims that high protein, including like drinking milk and all these things, could cause calcium loss. It could be hurting the kidney and it's bad for your bones. This claim has been disproved in many studies. Both plant and animal sources of protein promote strong bones and muscles. Milk and dairy products as part of a balanced diet are. So again, are we going to just believe them, or do we want to look a little deeper? Now, I'm going to flip forward here. Examine.com is one of the groups that does kind of the work for us. They're really smart dudes. They go read all the data and they try to give us some kind of action. So look at this. Vitamin D supplementation did not reduce the risk of any of the primary endpoints of problems. So, whoa, vitamin D didn't help, kind of what we thought. It also starts to look at the whole issue around the acid-base balance. I think I put that one in. Let me go back to, let's see, I think it's on this one. Yeah, so just, I don't want to hop around too much, but I want to continue the thought of, if we're thinking about the reasons why we still have fractures and illness in the elderly, and we think it might be because we're not getting enough protein or we're getting too much protein that's causing this acid problem, I wanted you to kind of see this flow. So your dietary protein intake supposedly has release of acids into the bloodstream. Bone resorption takes place because it's trying to neutralize. Remember this little idea here that was calcium from the bone has to get into the bloodstream to neutralize the protein. So it's trying to neutralize the acid level. That's why we take some bone out of our storage depot. And then we can kind of see these markers in the bloodstream. So there are some studies that show some confusion around what happens with bone getting put into the bloodstream from our bone reserves. Like, what's causing that? Release of minerals into the bloodstream is what I just mentioned: calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. We see that we're peeing them out. So what's turning that on? Could it be our food intake, too much or even not enough protein? Or could it be something with our biome? Because now in this article, we're reading that the biome really has so much to do with our bone health. So I don't have answers for you, but I have a lot of interesting questions. So our takeaway should always be, what am I going to do? What's going to be my action? Well, I'm going to keep my biome healthy. I'm going to eat reasonable amounts. So 0.8, we've decided, is around 2 servings of meat a day at the most. 3 ounces, your palm size or smaller, or the equivalent. of your intake of protein. So not too much and not too little. So then when we think of what is a current diet trend right now that's pushing take out carbs and put in protein and fat?
Keto.
Yes. Does it tell you to eat maybe 3 ounces of meat twice a day, or it tells you to eat a lot? 8 ounces, baby. 10 ounces, lots of meat. And then we start seeing this happen. Because now it's really high, and we start seeing calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus in the urinary, in the urinary excretion. Now, some studies will say, nope, that's not true. We have lots of people that are eating keto and they've never been healthier. And that's where, it's like, I throw up your arms. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's right, right? So their individual differences are profound. That's why we always go back to, all right, as scientists, we want to look at a big study size to make sure we understand, can we make a blanket statement? It's pretty hard to do because, man, the human body is so diverse. So diverse. If we know we're predisposed to bone disease, in general, would a diet that's high in protein be a good idea? No. That's my suggestion. No. Because we are pretty darn sure that a diet that's high in meat is what? It's hard on the tummy. Remember we talked about the big prime rib at Christmas? Whew, everything's slowed down. The gut biome is getting cement in there. It's very hard to keep things flowing. The gut bacteria are kind of suffocating. Do you remember in the video we watched where it was the cute little bugs in the gut? There was a great animation of this. If you haven't watched that video again at home, do. The second brain. And so it helps you see kind of a window into what's happening in our gut biome, and based on different foods that we put in there. And if it's a high protein, low fiber eating style, it really changes how happy those little bacteria are in our body. So if we know we're predisposed to this, then we probably want to be careful with excessive amounts of protein intake. So that's really what this is telling us. Relative risk is really looking at whether or not we dose with vitamin D or not. The length of how long we take a supplement didn't have any bearing on how we could reduce the risk or the incidence of fractures. So I don't think that supplementation is the answer. Vitamin D in preventative medicine, are we ignoring the evidence? This one is coming from the British Journal of Nutrition, so it's not a proclamation. It's not something you find in a textbook. It's researchers kind of sitting around talking about it. That's what I like. Researchers sitting around, smart people going, what do we want to do about this? What the abstract says is vitamin D is metabolized in the liver, and then it goes to the kidney and into the vitamin D hormone called calcitrol. Receptors are present in more than 30 different tissues. So vitamin D is important in so many spots. It talks about how the best indicator to assess vitamin D deficiency is really tough. There's so many areas to look at. And what we're concerned about is that we don't have any correlation between vitamin D levels and the incidence of fracture. It's completely taken away. No sunlight and really bad diet. We see the softening of the bones. You remember what that's called? Rickets. And you only see that in the textbooks, because remember, people are getting probably enough protein. Only in some of the third world countries are we seeing that, and it's still quite rare. So, looking at evidence into action, I think the decision process here, and this was in 2007, that it's really, there's still a lot we don't understand. It's normal bone and mineral physiology and metabolism has a lot of unknowns. Okay? European children and young adults often have circulating levels in the insufficiency range during winter. But the good thing is, how long are we in winter? Only a few months, and then we get outside and our levels go back up. Well, that's a great thing, right? it's not because they took a pill. There is now general agreement that a low vitamin D status is involved in the pathogenesis of osteoporosis. We just don't know how to act on it. Moreover, vitamin D insufficiency can lead to disturbed muscle function. So we know there's something going on. We just don't know exactly how to treat it. And so, kind of in closing, we need to read, we need to learn. We don't want to act too quickly. We want to be conservative in our approach so that our risk and efficacy are in our mindset. We're trying to think through what's going to give me the most potential benefit with the least amount of risk. And so the food list, looking at portion, is going to help with not only our biome, but it's also going to help with our ease in digestion. And we're going to learn about where we can put in more of the prebiotics and take out the chemicals that will make it harder on our body to digest. And, as far as the pH level, if we eat a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables, do you think we're going to have plenty of phosphorus and magnesium and calcium? Yes, so much. I mean, potassium. What foods are high in potassium? I know, and bananas are so funny. They always get the first, hat off. And there is so many vegetables and fruits that are like twice and 3 times as much as the banana. But that was easy. Long ago, somebody just said banana, and now it's stuck. Can you think of another food that's high in potassium? Tomato, potato, sweet potato is like 3 times as much. Spinach and kale like 10 times as much as a banana, calorie for calorie. So it's kind of cool when you realize that if we're eating a diet that's rich in color, get your protein, of course, but don't be overly concerned about getting enough protein. Instead, be more focused on getting more color and more variety. Okay? I hope that's helped. We're going to delve into a little different topic next week. We're going to look at exercise and the physiology around exercise. I kind of talked about it out here, and so now I want to give us a little science around the exercise physiology so we can get excited about what's our body doing when we breathe more and we start bringing fresh oxygen to all of our arteries and arterioles and taking out the venous exchange of gases, and what does that do to our brain function and what does that do to our mood. I think let's see if I can show you, when in your little handout, I kind of talked about mood and how does that really improve on our overall health. And I think that's an untapped area. And we know that our enteric nervous system has a big impact on our mood. And the other thing that has a big impact on our mood is oxygenation to the brain as well as sunshine. So in the middle of winter, I thought, what better topic than to really delve into the beauty of fitness and how it improves on our metabolism, on our mood, and of course, our ability to build our immune system throughout life. Okay? Awesome. See you soon.